Welcome back to Mike's Gun World. Okay, we're about to start a three-part series on the M1 carbine. And I've got a nice example here that was manufactured by Inland, which was a division of General Motors during World War II. There are over 6.2 million of these produced during the war. Now, I want to break this video up into three parts. The first part being the disassembly and reassembly of it, which is actually fairly simple. So before we even get into that, I want to do just a little bit of identification on the gun in case you're looking at an M1 carbine. I can give you some tips and tricks and things to look for on the receiver that'll tell you if you have an actual M1 carbine from World War II. In part two, I want to do a video on the bolt takedown, which is actually not as easy as a disassembly, reassembly of the firearm itself. For the bolt takedown, you need a special tool, and it is a little bit more complicated. And then in part three, let's get it out on the range, the 85-yard range, and see how well we do. That being said, let's get going with part one. Hey, if you're liking our videos, you're liking our content, please hit like, subscribe, leave some comments down below. I try to get back to you as quickly as possible. I always do appreciate the feedback. Also, don't forget to hit the little bell so you're notified every time we drop some new content. Finally, you can follow us on Facebook at Mike's Gun World. And if you need to reach me directly, you can hit me up at mikesgunworld@gmail.com. All of your support is always appreciated. Okay, now let's get to the video. Okay, so the best way to tell if you have a World War II version of the M1 carbine are the markings on the receiver. So in the front of the receiver, right up here, and I'll bring it up closer to the camera in a second, it should say US carbine caliber 30 M1 stamped on the front of the receiver. And then back here on the rear of the receiver, kind of under the rear sight, is the name of the manufacturer. In the case of this example, it's Inland. And then below that would be the serial number. And Inland was a division of General Motors, having produced by far the most M1 carbines in World War II, a little bit north of 2.2 million. There were 6.2 million, a little bit north of 6.2 million produced in total. 11 manufacturers got the contract. One of them, it was Irwin Pedersen, had their contract pulled and then given over to General Motors Saginaw plant. So there are no Irwin Pedersens out there, although receivers were produced by them. They were converted over by General Motors Saginaw plant. But then there were 10 manufacturers in all producing, like I said, a little bit north of 6.2 million. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get this on camera. My lighting's not great today, but right here in the upper part of the receiver is where it says US carbine caliber 30 M1. And then behind your rear sight, you'll get the manufacturer. You see Inland and then the serial number. And my serial number equates to being manufactured in 1944. So these were in service. Between August of 1942 and end of hostilities in August of 1945, VJ Day, and production stopped completely. Then some aftermarket production happened much later in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but the original M1 carbine has these two markings, and that's what will tell you if you're official or not. Then a couple other things. I do have a mag pouch on the rear stock here. Holds two 15-round magazines. And it's dated and stamped to the manufacturer. This one's dated 1942. And then the bayonet this is an M4, so this is post-war. They only had M3s in World War II, and the pommel had about a 45-degree angle here, kind of follows along the scabbard. That would be an M3, and then it had leather bands on the grips here. They're all Parkerized, so this is a nice example post-war. The U.S. government was screwing around with different materials. This one happens to be plastic. Still a nice example, exact dimension, size, everything is as the M3. The pommel's just straight as opposed to that 45-degree angle. Then on the scabbard itself, it's marked US M8A1 right there, and that's how you know that you have a World War II scabbard. So that's just a couple of things that'll help you if you're looking to buy one, you're at a gun show or something, and you're trying to figure out if it's original or not. You definitely want to look for those markings on the receiver. All right, like I said, taking this down is really, really, really simple. Let's just unsnap the sling, and we're going to get that out of the way. And honestly, you probably only need 2 tools to take this down for a good field strip. The front barrel band here has 2 things. It has a screw, a barrel band screw right there, and then there's a spring right here. So we want to get that barrel band screw out, and then once that's out, we're going to take a punch and we're going to push down on this spring right here. There's a spring right here. You're going to push down on that, and we're going to pull forward on the barrel band and the scabbard lug are all connected. It's one piece. So if you get the spring out of the way, pull forward a little bit, and that whole barrel band, everything slides forward just like that. The handguard comes off the top. We can put that to the side. Here we go. The rifle itself, there's a little stud in the back of the receiver right there, and it hooks into the stock right there. Basically pull everything right out of the stock. The next thing you want to do, the trigger group right here has a pin that probably, because I cleaned it so well recently, has a tendency to just kind of fall out on its own. And there it is. So right here, let me get that on camera. That's not on camera. Right here is where that trigger group pin goes. That's holding the trigger group in place. On mine, you just turn it over, give it a shake, and that pin will come right out. There it is. And now your whole trigger group comes out. That simple. The next thing is, this is a gas operated rifle. There is a gas chamber right here with a piston, a gas piston that actually cycles the action. And that piston sits right here. You see it? There we go. We're not going to take that piston out. There's no reason to for a field strip. And then the operating handle spring, really just pull back on it. It's under some pressure. Be careful. Let me make sure I get that on camera again. Very simple to pull it out. That's it. It just comes right out. Now you're ready to get the bolt out and the operating slide out. So there are 2 slots. There's one here in the barrel where the other side of the operating handle, there's a groove in the operating handle. It'll fit in there. And then there's a groove back here along the slide for the operating handle, where you can pull the operating handle up. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes these just come right apart, and sometimes you just gotta kind of work your way through There, we got it up off the bolt. It's up off the bolt now. See if we can get the bolt out of the way. Nope, she's gonna fight me. I wish there was an easier. I gotta tell you, I wish it was easier. Sometimes they just come right apart, and sometimes you just have to fight with them a little bit. There we go. Okay. Of course, when I want to shoot a video, it just doesn't want to fall apart for me. Here, let's get the barrel out of the, or the bolt out of the way. There. Now the bolt is definitely out of the way, and the bolt slides out that easy. I don't know if that was on camera, but once you get the operating rod in this slot up over the bolt lug right here, the bolt will fall out. Now we should be able to get the operating rod out. No, and it's gonna just keep fighting. There we go, and it drops right out like that. Now your rifle's completely torn down and ready for a very good cleaning. When I shot the short for this series that was coming out, the rifle was actually fairly dirty, and I didn't realize just how dirty it was. In that short, you can see rounds kind of going to the 4 o'clock out of the ejection port. Some of them were hitting me in the face, some were hitting me on the brim of the cap. They were going in all different directions. So I completely stripped it. I did take apart the trigger group a little bit. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that on film today. But I got into everything and cleaned it and needed a very deep clean. The bolt needed to be taken apart, which I'm gonna do in part 2 of this series. You need a special tool to take the bolt apart. As easy as this all comes apart, oh my God. They kind of made the bolt pretty tricky. And then the other thing is the magazines. The magazines get dirty too, and the follower sometimes gets a little sticky, and I realized that my follower was sticky, and it needed a good cleaning. So to take a magazine apart underneath here toward the front of the magazine, I like to just get a screwdriver up in here and pull the bottom of the mag, and then the whole thing slides out. Be careful, there is a spring in there. And there's your spring coming out of the magazine. Now, what is really important to note, the position of the spring. Okay, so the spring has a high point here, and that has to be to the back of the magazine and underneath the follower. Otherwise, the follower will not sit up high enough, and cartridges will not feed properly. So that is a properly seated spring. The back of the follower is up high, and if the spring were in backwards, you can see the follower kind of hangs down a little bit, and then cartridges will not feed correctly. So you definitely want that high point to the back. Look, I know a lot of people say don't put oil in here. You don't want to collect dirt, grease, and all that other stuff. You know what? I put ballistol in here. I ran my micro fibers through here. I cleaned up all the parts. I wiped them down really well. And right now, let's get this mag put back together. Just slide the base back in, and it pops right back in place. Right now, all the shells are ejecting perfectly. So when we do get out to the range, I'll put together the slow motion of the shells hitting me in the head and the brim of the hat and going all different ways when it was dirty, and then I'll shoot a little bit more video of them coming out correctly. So, you know, putting it back together, honestly, just reverse everything we did. I like to get the bolt into place. I like to get this on camera, get the bolt into place. That should be, yep, that's sliding. It's that simple. It just seats right in, and it does turn. As it ejects around, it does turn over, kind of like the M1 Garand. And then the operating, the operating slide, again, here's a little stud that I was talking about that fits in the little slot right here on the side of the receiver. You want to try to line that up. Get your bolt open. Line that up. And it should slide right in place. Again, slide the whole charging handle to the back until you can raise it up. When it hits the little notch back here, you should be able to raise it up. Why won't you raise up? There it is. And then you should be able to slide the bolt back into position under the operating handle. And it's going to be one of those days because I wanted to film this today. It wants to fight me. Here we go. We got the bolt seated back there, operating handle back down, and everything's working as it should. So then we want to get the operating handle spring back in place and just seat it. It's got a little notch right there. Just seat it, and our action's working correctly, or the bolt's sliding correctly. It's that simple. So there's two grooves on the back of the trigger group. They slide on to the two tangs right here, back of the receiver. And it slides into place that simple. Take our trigger group pin, put it back in place, and remember, it has a tendency to fall out. If it's clean, it's going to fall out. So be careful that it doesn't fall out and you drop it somewhere in your shop. Take your stock, and then we're going to just basically put the rifle back together. Here's our upper hand grip. Make sure you put it on the correct way. And my air compressor turned on. Okay, so about every 3 or 4 days, my air compressor has a very, very slow leak. It's not worth even fooling around with, but about every 3 or 4 days, it decides to turn on and bring itself all the way back up to full. And of course, right in the middle of the video, it did that. So anyway, the next step is to get the handguard on, and you just put it on top, slide it up against the receiver. That's in place. And then we're going to take the barrel band and the bayonet lug and slide it over the front of the stock. And like everything else, you got to wrestle with it just a little bit, but you want to make sure that once you do get it on, whoops. Once you do get it on, you compress the spring right there so it snaps back into place. And it is back in place now. So we're all back together except for the barrel band screw. And let's take our screw, put it back into the barrel band. Backwards. No. My barrel band's got just a little bit of a bend in it, so it doesn't always catch. And you can't over tighten it. It only goes so far, and that's it. It's in place. And then let's get our sling back in place. And that's all there is to the takedown and reassembly of the M1 carbine. Very simple. All right. As usual, if you're liking the videos, please hit like and subscribe. Hit the bell. You'll be notified when we drop new content. This is part 1 of the series of the M1 carbine. In part 2, we're actually going to take the bolt down. All your support is always appreciated. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you soon for part 2, the bolt takedown.